And so next up we have Shawn Mallen. So Shawn Mallen is the manager of hydroponics and manufacturing at A.M.A. Horticulture Inc. He works with customers to find hydroponic solutions for tomato, pepper, cucumber, eggplant, berry, leafy green, and organic crops. When a solution doesn't exist, Shawn works closely with the customers and suppliers to design and implement custom solutions that suit the growers' unique needs. In his role, Shawn works with a large number of European companies and introduces their products to the Canadian and U.S. markets. He regularly visits suppliers in Europe, bringing knowledge and innovation home to A.M.A. and its customers. Since 2007, Shawn has been expanding A.M.A.'s hydroponics business and has brought significant horticulture experience to the A.M.A. team. Shawn has more than 20 years of greenhouse experience, ranging from cut flowers, potted and holiday crops, bedding plants, vegetable propagation and production, in the capacity of grower and general manager. He has an understanding of crop planting and greenhouse design and expertise in urban agriculture and organic growing. Shawn received his diploma in agriculture business from the University of Guelph. Shawn, you're on, and he's unmuted. Yep. Here you
Perfect. So you can hear me good?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully this goes well with our recent power outage here. So been having some fun behind the scenes. Yeah, so just my background, that's excellent. So yeah, cut flowers, potted plants, did a lot of propagating, got into vegetable propagation, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, general greenhouse, all that fun stuff. So getting background there, and along with the traveling to Europe, which is the Softfruit Conference, comes up in early January. I've been attending that. Similarly, I do a lot of presentations in an exhibition. It's a 2-day event. So if anybody ever has a chance to go overseas to attend that, it would be worth your while. It's a lot of very technical stuff. It's for the berries in general. So all of your strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, it's a whole berry thing. This presentation is a little bit off of what I did a few years ago with NASCA in New Orleans. So I do kind of travel around a bit with the berry growers in the last 3 to 4 years. So yeah. So what we're talking about today here is specialized substrates for containerized strawberry production. Relatively new in North America, we would say, last 3 to 4 years. Locally where we are, there's over 50 acres of greenhouse production in strawberries. Predominantly 2 growers are the main ones, but we have a number of growers that are 2 acres under, a couple glass houses here and there. It's really find its way into a niche market, and the local grocers are carrying them, and the demand is there for local berries and also greenhouse berries versus the other ones that you see and get at the store. Oops, sorry, there we go. So that's what we're talking about here. Basically, if we were talking normal growing, you're in the ground. So all we're doing here is just getting them out of the ground, into tunnels or high tunnels, greenhouses, getting it usually into a container or a grow bag. Kind of that's what we're starting with. So this is different for growers because you're used to growing in the ground in traditional soil. Now we're into substrates which contain peat moss, some coir, some perlite, some other things. So these may be new to some growers, and these may be common to other growers. But that's the general sense of what we're doing here. There are plenty and plenty of styles. As you can see from these pictures, some of them are, people make them themselves. Some can get very intricate, some are low end, but they all basically perform the same function. When we look at getting into a hydroponic setup, then we also throw in the fact that we're recirculating our water, or at the bare minimum, we're collecting our water. So that becomes a critical factor in what we're doing. Some more pictures here. You can kind of see the containers on the left and the top one. Sometimes, multiple crops, high and low, using systems. There's some swing systems, there's some raise and lower systems. So they get pretty intricate when it comes to maximizing your space and your plants per your meter squared, let's say. And then ideally, for crop and for labor reasons, to get that crop, say waist high, so that as far as picking the fruit and doing your crop care, it's at a much easier level, easier on labor. There's a number of growers here that go from the field into a high tunnel, and their story is that traditionally in the ground they might be 8 plants per meter, whereas when they go into a tunnel system, that they can push that to 10 to 12 plants per meter. So now you have a plant density which is higher, which translates into a higher yield. When you're talking about crop care or just picking the fruit, traditionally growers are growing, or workers are growing into the field, 2 boxes going in, carrying those 2 boxes out. So you could have 2, 3, 4 trips in the same row with growers or workers. So going in and out. So a lot of time the labor is spent just literally walking. So we get into raised systems and pathways and walkways, then we get into carts or rail systems where the workers go in one end, out the other, and have picked the entire fruit from that row. So again, you have the labor savings, plus the fact that they're at a more comfortable level. So they're picking the crop, so there's some time savings there. So we're going to talk about substrate here. We're just going to mention traditionally growers in the field. You have different types of plants here. We're trying to use tray plants, which we get into different things is one of the things that the industry has brought, and I think it's going back into the field production, is this idea of flower mapping. So knowing exactly what you're getting in a plant, as opposed to just the bare root plants. We've all seen the bare root plants. You can get some that are really large, some that are really small. There's a lot of variation from each plant when you're putting them in the field next to each other down the row. So this concept kind of comes from the vegetable side of the tomato, pepper, cucumber guys, and because of the greenhouse guys, they want to know exactly what they're getting. So they want every plant, as much as it can be, to be identical, so that they know the yield. So everything is kind of more focused, and in that regard, they kind of know what they're getting. So that has brought the game up on the tray plant situation, and so the growers, the propagators, are spending that time. So they're able to give you excellent plants. Also, when you're putting in a tray plant, you're going to be picking that fruit a lot sooner than you would a bare root plant. That bare root plant needs to find its time to establish itself and get going. Where here you have a productive plant, we're just ready to go. So you can see in these pictures, there's different ways they come. The one on the far right, so this instance is going in a grow bag. So that's kind of what it would be looking like in that situation. Different substrates for this. So we're not going to do too much on this part of it. We'll focus on kind of the growing end and the finishing end. So the big question is, yes, why are we growing in a substrate? For us here, we provide substrates from BVB Substrates out of Holland. We'll get to that a little bit later. Is why are we using substrate from Holland and not from North America? So for this purposes, we're putting in a containerized or growing, so it changes the dynamics of what you're doing. Drainage becomes important. Your water to air ratio. There's a lot of factors that come into play that maybe aren't into play. You're able to control your humidity. You're able to control your light. If you have some, alternate lighting situations, you're able to control your temperature. So there's a lot of different factors when you bring stuff into a high tunnel or into a glass house that you're not contending with out in the field. Sorry. So why are we doing this, right? So pretty straightforward here. Reduce the disease pressure because we're getting it out of the soil. And if you're in the berry world, use fumigation. So you can't really go back into the same field over and over again because diseases tend to stay in the soil. They're harder to get rid of. So this way you're starting fresh. You're starting with the soil. You're off the ground. There is no contact with the ground below. So every year you can grow in the same space. Easier pest control. Now everything's up off the ground, so there's less places for the pests to hide. Easier access for the grower to apply whatever he's doing. So everything becomes a little bit easier in your application. If you're in a high tunnel or a greenhouse, now we take weather out of the situation. So wind, you can spray anytime you want to spray or apply whenever you want to apply and not have to worry about your outdoor circumstances with Mother Nature. Overall, we do see a reduction in chemical usage, a very efficient use of water and nutrition. I would echo further comments is, yeah, you keep testing your soil, do your weekly own EC and pH, you can in-house in samples away. These are ideal ways that you know what's going on currently, and then you can put forth a plan for the future. So that gets into steering your crop. So if you know what's going on, you're up ahead, if you need a wet crop, you can make it wet. If you need to dry it down, you can do that. So it's very flexible because you're controlling those factors. Obviously, weather damage to the fruit, that can also be, birds, so animals. So that is literally non-existent. So we take those factors away. And as you can see in the picture, I mean, you have just nice, clean fruit, nothing sitting in the soil, nothing's resting against the plastic. So you're really getting ideal fruit production. That's what people want to display. So with any type of system based on within a greenhouse, I mean, you have improved food safety. So you're able to control more things, reduce labor, as we touched on. The workers' conditions are vastly improved. And for you, the owner, the grower, you have less workers' compensation or less risks anyways. We touched on the examples from growers that it's a more efficient way of packing and producing than what you traditionally are. So there's some advantages there. The fruit, obviously, much better as far as marketability, and you're getting more saleable fruit as well. So the fruit that's excellent is nice, but then the other fruit is still nice. So it's increased both ways as a number and quality, which for the grower is going to give you improved profitability. So what are the parameters that we're looking at here that it's going to affect kind of what the recipe is when you start thinking about the substrate? Because what kind of substrate do I need? Lots of factors. You can go left to right, round and round. Maybe none is more important. But everything that you need to know. What kind of plant material are you getting in? Who is the plant material coming from? There's a lot of good propagators out there. So there's that type. Is it from seed? Is it bare root? What type of season are we dealing with, or where is your climate? Obviously, the grower where I'm at in southwestern Ontario is going to have different conditions where you're at. Substrate handling. What are you able to do? Are you able to handle large bales, small bales, grow bags? Do you have a potting machine? Can you fill large containers, small containers? What is the experience of the grower? Obviously, the crop and the variety makes a difference. Crop duration, both from a marketing standpoint of view, what are you trying to achieve? And both from a temperature or seasonality, what are you trying to achieve? Most growers are trying to stay away from the traditional field crop on price points. They don't really want to compete with that side of it. But then we see growers that are in the greenhouse industry, if they can provide a product all year round and a stable product, then the chain stores, although it's nice to get that cheaper product, but now they have a secured product. And there seems to be room for both, because there's still going to be a seasonality of what we're growing, but you don't lose at that time frame. But that's also can be a time frame where you look at maybe that's when you switch crops, maybe that's when you're doing your cleanup. So obviously it'd be more profitable to sell berries in February and March than it would be in July and August. Irrigation system. What do you currently have? There's an investment there. That goes hand in hand with the growing system. So, which we showed on some of the earlier slides, is it going to be, gutter connect? What kind of troughs are you using? Is it going to be a bag system? Is it going to be a container system? So there's a lot of variations there that we look at. And ultimately, the biggest variation is the actual grower. When we look at soil, just from a basic standpoint, you can see the picture on the top left. You can see the healthy roots mean, you got lots of roots on the bottom, but you can see as you go further up towards the plant, there's a nice root system growing there. It's branching out. So that's a good soil. That's how you can see that you really got your moisture levels throughout the crop in the soil, not just at the bottom. Or you can see on the next slide, really those plant roots are tight to the plant itself. There's not a lot of roots at the bottom, so it's probably really, really wet, you know, at the top. And then the dry down, it's too much overall wet. So there is that variation where you want to be able to be a nice moisture throughout the crop. Whereas if you're in the field, obviously, and you get 4 days of rain, I mean, there's nothing you can do with that. That's a wet crop. So you have to be experienced enough and learn that side of things that you're able to control it and how to respond to that. So some of the substrates that we touched on. So basically there's peat. Assume everybody knows what peat is. Coir, coconut husk, and then perlite. Different variations of these, different combinations, different amounts within those variations. It really depends on the grower. There are some, you know, mixes that in a general sense work better than others, but again, it comes down to the grower, and some of them have different price points, obviously. So it depends on where you want to be at. So we have peat, the cocoa peat, which in the cocoa peat, or the cocoa core itself, you have cocoa peat, you have the coconut fibers, and then you also have the coconut chips. So there's 3 there in the same thing, and then you add your perlite. When it comes to the coconut, so the process is, when we talk, the one is our BC5 plus. It comes with a couple different fractions. So fractions are the sizes of the peat itself and the core. The smaller the fibers, smaller the pieces, the wetter it could be. The bigger the pieces, you know, the more air that's going to allow you. So coming up with a combination of all those things help you come up with the ideal substrate for growing berries. So why do we use European peat? There's certainly a difference between Canadian, North American peat than European peat. The process of collecting the peat is a vacuum process in North America, so you're generally, the bogs are taking the top layers off, and that's kind of regenerating or coming to the top surface. So it's always the smaller fibers that are being used. When they cultivate the European peat, they're digging down and taking big chunks, so you're getting all those different fractions of it when you're to be able to mix. So you end up with what you see here is you have fluffier, you have longer fibers than what would traditionally be against North American peat. This allows you with more air, better drainage, which is also what you add the perlite in some instances for to help with that. Better water uptake capacity. Structurally, it has a longer life to it. Again, with any type of mix, when you're putting in, the bigger the chunks, you know, the longer it can be, the longer it's going to last, which is more air. Every substrate is going to break down, become smaller, and, you know, going to close those airways for the pathways for air. So this way you can have better control as a grower, because you'll be able to know what you're doing, and you can repeat this year after year after year. If you're bringing in new substrate, that's the same. So there's 3 types that we said earlier. Pretty straightforward. It's coconut peat, coconut fiber, coconut chips. Cocoa, obviously everybody knows what coconuts are, hopefully. So this is where it comes from. It used to be a waste product, but now it is being grown just for this purpose. So you see a lot of companies that, you know, this is exactly all they're doing. Cocoa is a different substrate. It's interesting to see where it comes from, and it's not all the same, depending on the factory and where it's produced. So there are different ways, and then we get into, you know, is it washed, is it super washed, is it buffered? So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So not all core is created equally, we would say. So through BVB, that's what we look to them to do, is they ensure that all that, you know, from year to year, from time to time, from crop to crop, from production cycle, as far as what they're producing, that it's all the same, comes from the same plantations, see uniformity. So that's big, because there is, even within crops or within that growing season, you could have different bags performing differently. So you want to make sure that you've got a nice, good supplier. Fibers are taken from the inner part of the shell, so those are stored, and then they decay. So there is a bit of a process here. It's, you know, it's not just guys chopping down coconuts and away it goes, although that has been known to happen. So especially for berry production, and not always with other crops, but for sure for berry production, we always use washed and buffered coir. No questions. We don't, as far as A.M.A is concerned, that's all we use, that's all we provide. Too many variables. As growers, you can tackle those variables for sure. If you only get washed, not buffered coir, so it's not like an impossible endeavor, but we feel we provide you with the best growing start that you can have. So this is why we do that. We kind of just stay away from the other products. Hopefully you're getting a consistent higher end product that you can follow year after year. So it meets all the requirements. The RHP, that's traditionally a European requirement. So everything meets certain guidelines to go through. We use BVB. Fellow there, they have a couple soft fruit specialists that we rely on as well for even water readings, soil readings, just general advice. They're more than willing to do so, as long as you know, we're using a BVB product, let's say. But they're kind of the experts in the area, in the field, and they've developed these mixes specifically for the berry production. A.M.A, we're a Fafard dealer. We make Ellapots. We love Canadian Peat. We use it. I've used it as a grower, but for certain crops, we look for certain specific types of substrates, and this is one of those in the berry world. Kind of this, you get a higher product that we just don't have here available. So orchids is another one. So there's different crops that we specifically use BVB substrates for, and for that purpose and reason. Okay. So the Coir products, and if you're not familiar with Coir, and if you're just a peat grower, so there is some difference and some added value in that. Some people like it, some people don't like it. Depends on the grower. In general, we would say if you have both Coir and peat, the Coir gives you a little bit more buffer. It's a little more forgiving of that nature. If you're watering crops as a grower, maybe you have a little more time in between waterings to deal with stuff. So it's kind of a more relaxed growing, if you could say, that you don't have to be as urgent with everything. Different times with peat, yeah, if you dry too much, then you just re-wetting it. So it just kind of extends your period as a grower to be able to be a little more at ease with what's going on, but you certainly do have to get used to growing with it. And then you have to get used to with the combinations of Coir on whether it's fiber, coconut chips, or what that combination is. And different growers like different things, and that's fine. Then adding that peat helps. It just, you know, just seems if you're going to make the best possible substrate in as close to perfect as can be, then it is adding the peat with the Coir and the perlite. And that's kind of the, you know, the happy recipe that works. So that's kind of the way it's at. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, yeah, you need to monitor your pH as well, your EC levels. This helps you get started when it's washed and buffered cocoa mixed with the peat, that you're coming in at the right level. So right from the start, you're not falling behind. But yeah, you still need to watch and maintain that and keep it going. Perlite, I'm sure hopefully everybody's familiar with. So that's a volcanic rock, right? High porosity, very lightweight. So also helps when shipping product as far as containers in the in the shipping world, so we can lighten the weight, because peat and coir would be a lot heavier substrate, so it does minimize that and save on some maybe shipping costs as far as that goes. Perlite can hold a lot of air, so it has a lot of air in it, sorry. So this helps with your substrate based with your peat, your cocoa holding the water, and your perlite allowing you to still have air within that substrate. So that kind of helps everything work well. Substrate compaction. So this would be not unusual, I guess, as you know, if you're in the field. So, which would be why we would till up the ground somewhat, so we can get some air into there and be able to put the plants in. When we talk about substrates and containers and grow bags, it still applies. So if you're filling your pots and your containers, if you're getting the grow bags would come on a pallet. They're not compressed, mind you, but they're piled up in the weight, so they would be squished. So it's good to kind of reintroduce that air a little bit, pat them from the sides to kind of fluff them back up a little bit. When you're filling through a potting machine, it's ideally better to fill with a potting machine as opposed to manually or by hand, or however you wanted to do that, so that you're getting consistency throughout your containers. So as you can see, the one on the left, lots of air. When you get it on the right, so that would be the same amount of substrate in the container. It's just obviously the one on the right is compressed more, so obviously you're going to have less air within that substrate. Next slide just shows the same thing within an actual situation. So you can see on the right picture, lots of roots, healthy roots, top to bottom. The one on the left has roots, but certainly you can see the discrepancy there. It's not the same. It's the same substrate, it's the same mix, it's identical, but then you see the weight there. So the one on the left was compressed more, so there's more volume of substrate in that container than in the one on the right. So you have to find that balance with what you're doing, and that is usually achieved through mechanization with potting filling machines, so that you're getting that consistency. You can deal with both of these, left or right, as a grower, as long as they're all the same. I can deal with the one on the left if that's how they all are. I can deal with the one on the right if that's how they all are. The difficult for me as a grower is when the left and the right, and I'm dealing with them both. How do I water that? They both have different demands. So this is where you want to be able to eliminate that and be consistent with your filling. More of your earlier talks touched on this, so there's not much I can really add to that, but basically you have your physical, and then you have your chemical. So the physical substrate is what we're talking about. You have your air, your water, your stability, your water uptake characteristics, and then you have your chemical, which you're going to get some charge in the different substrate offerings that we have, but that's just really a starter charge, so that's going to get you going. So we'll have some EC, pH, you have some minor nutrients in there, so that's going to give you a good start, and then you as a grower have to continue that on. And there's lots of different recipes. We'll touch on a few at the end. Like I said, the most popular one is the BC5++, which contains an element of coir. There's different fractions of peat and has the perlite to it. But there are different price points and different mixes that we can provide you with. In general, with the example from earlier, so row spacing, I mean, containers we usually typically have are 1 meter long or ½ meter long, and the grow bags are the same. So we're dealing with meters, so either 2 bags per meter, 2 containers per meter. Your row spacing on the width is roughly 1 meter. So when you look at what you're doing there, and it's traditionally, most common would be 10 plants per meter. That's the norm, but we do see growers, depending on the varieties that you're growing, trying to push the 12 plants per meter. But that really depends on the variety, depends on the grower, depends on the type of greenhouse, type of setup. So there are a number of factors there. So little different things that if you're a field grower that maybe you're not dealing with or contending with. From this picture, you can see to the left and right, there's the tape, little white strips following along the side of it. So that's for when the berries grow from the trusses, they kind of rest on those. So that's why you get the clean fruit and it's not resting up against anything. We see these types of setups quite often in the older greenhouses around here. We have a lot of, this gutter connected greenhouse, low greenhouses, glass, the old type, that are ideal for this. A lot of them are former flower growers, cut flowers. So a lot of times they do have the blackout curtains, the shade curtains. So those lend themselves fairly well for growing this type of crop. Again, it's smaller in size, so we have 2 acre range, half an acre range. You can push a lot of product through that amount of space. And then we have brand new facilities here, high-end, top-notch. One fellow, I believe, is at least 32 acres. Lights, infrared lights, energy curtains, shade curtains, humidity, fog, mist controllers, high-end carts. Right from the highest end, top-notch, the highest gutters that you would find. So yeah, it reaches the same. The crop can be the same. So both are acceptable and both are good. But we're seeing it both ways. So it's not just the new high-end growers, and it's also low-end. And then we also obviously see a little bit of the high tunnel, and that's more so in the last year or two, where we see the field guys, if they already have the high tunnels in their facilities on their property, they are doing a little bit of switch over and playing with this as well, because their investment costs may be a little bit lower than a traditional field grower, where if they have to purchase a high tunnel or hoop houses. We talked about how you would receive it. So you're receiving substrate in pallets. So there's a couple of different offerings that we have. We can go over those later. If you have questions or if you need samples, all that fun stuff. Just kind of more or less it's what you're maybe used to growing or versus what you want to do. You can get large 5-meter big bales, so you would need a specialized equipment to scrape that off and a filler. You can get compressed cocoa slabs to grow in. You can get 70-liter, 85-liter bags, loose filled. Or we also have just the grow bags themselves. We see a lot of growers moving into the grow bags initially. So obviously your substrate cost per plant is going to be a little bit higher, but your investment cost is lower. So if it's something that you're thinking about doing, you want to give it a try, but don't really want to buy a bunch of containers, or you want to use the right containers. So if you don't want to make that investment, let's first try, if you can sell the crop or sell the product, the fruit that you're getting. So grow bags is a good introductory solution. While we do have plenty of growers that just stick with that way, that's what they like to do. It fits their system. They've never invested in a filling machine, so there are some advantages as that as well. But when you look at a substrate cost per plant, obviously a container bulk substrate, that's going to give you your best bang for the buck in the long run. But there is a little upfront investment because the containers are going to last you, 5 plus 10 years. So you're going to carry that cost initially all up front. So a little bit of different approach there, but we see growers using the grow bags for the 1 year or 2 years and then switching over into a container because now they know it's something they're going to invest in the long term. A couple of the mixes, and there are more of these. There's a BC2. So there are some variations in these mixes. BC3 is probably our second most popular mix. And then that is just from peat. So there would be no coconut in there. So that deals with different fractions, and we deal with different sizes of the particles, and that's how it comes up with the mix. And then the last one, the BC5, is going to be 85% of what we give to customers and growers. It's the highest. If somebody just says to me, I want the best substrate, then this is the offering. We can have more details on that and other info as far as what is the makeup of that mix. So can share that through another questions or however we do that later. I don't know how I did for time there. So hopefully understood that. So we work with BVB substrates and we work with Bateau. So that's the containers. So meter troughs, 1 meter troughs, half meter. They have a couple different troughs. The important thing when you're dealing with containers, and if you're going to be putting in the aluminum troughs, Meteor Systems, Formflex, Haygrove Tunnel, there's a few other ones out there. Just the word of caution is, yes, you want to match the style of trough that is going to match the style of container that you want to grow in. A lot of the trough manufacturers don't necessarily know all the offerings of the containers, and different companies maybe only offer 2 or 3 options. Some offer 7 or 8, and some offer 60. So there's lots of options there. So we do have the containers that fit those options, or if you're a grower and you want a specific container, then you need to match that up with who's going to do in your troughs to make sure those match. We've had a couple instances where we've already given a grower a container, he's already growing in that container, the troughs go in, the container doesn't fit properly on the trough. So that's something just to be leery of and be aware of when you are talking to either your container that you're going to buy from or the troughs themselves. Make sure either those 2 people are talking, or make sure you're getting all the information so you're coming up with the right solution. That's about it for me. So welcome any questions. Yeah, if you're out and about and you're around in different shows, I will be in San Antonio for the NASCA. So I've been doing the NASCA for quite a while now. If you make it in February to Niagara, there's the fruit and vegetable show there, and I will be going to Holland, like I said, in January. So always available.